Hello, everybody watching today. I'm very pleased to have with me MLA Eric Bouchard. And I'm really excited to have a conversation with him today because there's a lot of people I've noticed in the last few years that do a lot of talking. And what I found with Eric is he didn't just talk the talk, but he walked the walk. And he is a first time MLA in Calgary. So, Eric, I'm just going to turn it to you. And if you could tell me a little bit more about yourself and what got you into politics, your background, and then I'm sure we'll jump into a few other things.
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Hi, Ava. Thanks for having me on. My name is Eric Bouchard. I'm the MLA for Calgary-Lougheed. New to politics. Just over a year ago, I would have never considered that. I would never even thought that I'd be sitting in the seat, doing a podcast with you or even being an MLA. So I was a small business owner. My wife and I bought a business in 2004. We expanded 2010, relocated 2015, and then expanded again in 2019. And then, for a few short months later, the world shut down and was kind of left figuring out what I was going to do. We struggled to kind of figure out how we were going to move forward, and I was asked to led up to certainly. I guess the best way to put it is, I my entire life I always assumed that government had my back. I guess I would show up to vote and never was really involved, and then over the last few years quickly recognized that there was no one advocating for small business and my voice was no longer heard. And I reached out to quite a few people, media outlets, to try and tell the story of small business. And I was told pretty much single-handedly that my story at the time wasn't of interest. So I was asked to run mid-December last year, and I said, okay, I'll talk to my family over the Christmas holidays. And surprisingly, they all said yes. They'd support me running, and I ran for it was a difficult nomination process. There was 5 of us in the nomination. I won that. I certainly didn't have the support of, I guess, it wouldn't be considered mainstream, but I wasn't the candidate of preference, but with a very strong team of volunteers, and I had lots of really, really good people in my corner. We won the nomination and then won the election May 29th, and here I am.
Love it. And so many thoughts and comments that I want to touch on, and I keep just writing notes. But the first thing I wanted to delve into a little bit was you mentioned small businesses, and I myself had a small business, and I think that's something people don't appreciate. And I actually never knew you reached out to the media. So that explains a lot why people don't understand how incredibly hard that was for small businesses to be open one day and shut down the next day. Small businesses operate on very thin margins usually, and something like that, unless you're a very big business, you can't just change your whole business plan overnight. And I think people have a little bit forgotten that in some cases we were shut down overnight, opened up without any warning or notice, then shut down again without any warning or notice, and opened up again. And it's just not something you could, at the snap of your fingers, change. And it's interesting that you reached out to the media and they said that there's no interest in that story. So can you tell me more about even why you thought, okay, I want to share this story? Why was it important to you to share your story?
Well, I think because there was no, I felt like for the first time, I didn't really have a voice anymore. We'd been in business for quite a while. We'd go, a few ups and downs, a couple of recessions. And then I did use the media. I think it was 27 or 2018 was the first time, because business wasn't great for a number of years. That's whether you want to say NDP government from 2015 to 2019. My business was downtown Calgary. So there were fewer people in the downtown core, and I reached out to Global News, and they did a story with me. So I thought I could probably reach out again and tell the story of small business people. And they, I'm not going to list all of them, but collectively, no one wanted to tell my story. And I think, and then that's when I started getting a little bit more involved. I knew, I started going to the lockdown protests downtown Calgary. And the first few times I went, certainly they were smaller, but then as they started to grow, and some people, whether you call it anti-mask, anti-vaccine, whatever it was, for me it was all about the lockdowns. The lockdowns forced my business to close. Being in the downtown core, we tried to reopen, but we went from a building that had over 4,500 active pass cards in it to less than 100 people. So even when things were allowed to reopen again, uh, there was no one in the core for us to. It didn't make sense for us to reopen, so we stayed closed.
Yeah, and I think I like that you're saying, it didn't have to do with vaccines or lockdowns or whatever, but what I think people in Canada have been a little bit negligent of is even understanding what's going on, questioning what's going on. And the fact that you even just started to get involved and question things, I think that in Canada we've been like in the States, normally people in Canada disparage the United States people for being, it's about me, and being patriotic a little bit. And in Canada, we've had a little bit of that. Canadians aren't like that. We're polite. But I don't think that's the case the more I look into how we reacted. I think it's very healthy to stand up for ourselves, but also to question things. So I think that's great. I was surprised that more people didn't ask those questions that you did. And what surprises me the most too is there's so much always talk in Canada about supporting communities and small businesses and having, like let's work together and be inclusive and all that stuff. But really, when you're somebody like you that's trying to do good for your community, you were shut out. And so I think it really shows that a bit of hypocrisy in Canada, that you just had to build up a new community as well. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. You started going to these like just rallies, really. And then you got to know people. So how did that look? Because then you said later on that you were working with them and then some people encouraged you to run in the end. So how did that look?
Yeah, so this would have been late December 2020, early 2021. So we handed over the keys to our business in September of 2021 after, a year and a half of being closed, but we no longer had, and our landlord was working with us throughout the time, but they wanted full rent come September 2021, and 17 and a half grand with less than a month with less than 100 people.
And
Just
just, I'm going to repeat that because a lot of people, I didn't know, I realize it, rent lease rates, you said 17 grand a month. I don't think people even contemplate it could be that much. So when they were providing, the government was providing maybe 30 or 40 grand in loans, not relief,
oh,
that
gone in a
lasted
couple
a
months
month and a half for
for
you,
sure. No,
plus
we're
utilities, plus
yeah,
all the other expenses. Yeah.
correct. Yeah, not to get too far into, but it left our family in financial ruin. And I'm still working that out, and I'll save the banking discussion for another day because it's still ongoing and still hasn't been completely resolved.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I got involved, started attending these rallies. Um, they went from they were small, from 40, 50 people to, I guess at the height, there was over 20,000 people. And that's another, you wouldn't know it because it was not reported, and I would have friends who would, you know, they were supporting me. They were supporting, you know, the, starting to really question things, and they would show up and then they'd go home on a Saturday afternoon, and then they'd text me or call me and say, "Hey, I was watching on TV and I didn't see anything." And the only time that they really reported one was because the tail end of it happened to coincide with a fire that was happening downtown Calgary. Yeah, it's just brutal. There's no coverage, and so then yeah, I guess I had in December 2020, I wrote a letter to 26 business owners, basically saying that we need to do something. We don't have a voice. We're not we're getting picked off one by one. We're all independent business people. Most didn't respond. One guy responded by saying, "I'm not. I I get what you're saying. I'm not really interested, but I know someone who is interested." And so he forwarded me his contact info. I got together with him the next day. The following week, we started this group. There was 8 of us, and I think there's easily over 100 guys now that still get together once a week, and that was the basis, and it coincided pretty much the same time as the trucker rally. It was early January of 2021, and we were writing municipal, provincial, federal. Felt like we were really doing something. We didn't know what exactly we were doing, but it culminated to this group essentially asking me if I'd consider running in December or if I'd run for the Calgary-Lougheed vacant seat from Jason Kenney.
Very interesting. And so this is one thing I've been saying over the last 2 years, more so lately, is although there's been crazy hurdles and it's been really difficult because it really disrupted our comfort zones, COVID and all of the restrictions and things like that. But there is a blessing or like a good in it all because people also broke out of their normal shells. And as a result, you created this group, friendship, and started doing something that, like, I think you started with. I'm not a politician, but that's great. And that's what I'm hoping more people start to understand is it just takes one person to start getting involved, asking these questions, coordinating with others. That's a huge one because I see a lot of people are very mad about something, and there's probably 10, maybe 100, maybe 1,000, maybe more people that agree, but they're not looking to strategically coordinate. And I just really enjoy your story because you could see how that worked, from just like you wrote letters and then somebody connected you with someone and then you guys started. So I think that's so helpful for people to understand and know, even in these crazy times.
Oh, for sure. I think the power of community is it's unbelievable, and someone like me who never considered even think it was never. I was happy being a small business guy, and life was good for years, and then until it wasn't, and assuming that someone else always had my back, and getting together, getting involved. It really there's many different ways to get involved. I certainly didn't think I would be this involved ever, but here I am, and just learning about the process.
Yeah.
Even a year ago when I first started door knocking, I had no idea what a constituency association was. I did not really understand how it all worked, but by getting involved, and putting a team together, and we had some incredible, just passionate volunteers that people just wanted a seat at the table. They wanted their voices to be heard.
And I love that message because that's where people, I think, are losing sight that that is possible. And I find people are doing 1,000,010 other things when the easiest way to affect change is to just put your hand up and say, you know what, maybe I'm going to take this on. So you mentioned earlier about the nomination process and a little bit about that, but can you explain that a bit more? Because actually, I don't know exactly. I know I've heard about it a little bit, and just for everyone watching, you go to the ballot box on election day and there's one candidate from one party, one candidate from the other party. But before that, and I guess it depends on the riding at the time, there's a nomination process for each party to put somebody on the ballot. And so how did that look in your case? Because I know it's not always the same as well.
No, and I'm, learning as I go. I think mine was a little bit different because there was a vacant seat. I took
Jason Kenney's, like
Jason
you
Kenney.
said.
Yes, exactly. Go figure. Yeah, there's so much irony there that I sit in the same office that he did for I guess for almost 4 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it was a vacant seat, it was an open nomination, and you paid your nomination fee, and then you submitted an application to the party. There was an interview with the party, um, and then there was five of us that were essentially looking to become the United Conservative Party candidate for Calgary-Lougheed,
Hmm.
and that
And so,
started.
yeah, sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
it started early January, and they didn't really let us know when the actual election was going to be until 2 weeks prior. I think it was the long weekend, February 20th, February 21st,
2 weeks. A
when they said,
notice
yeah, I guess, yeah, 2.5 weeks because the election was March 13th. So
for
we
this
for
nomination.
this nomination, correct?
So
Yeah,
then, like, how did that look? Because I think that's the one thing, and honestly, myself again, I would have no idea what to do. So let's say you want to become an MLA. First, obviously, we have this nomination form, so you have to be the person on the ballot. So first, there's this hurdle. So you submitted an application. There were some dues. You
yeah.
said money due. Then you met with the party, and then what happens after that? Because then clearly you were successful. So you mentioned door knocking. And is it just, you have to start talking to people, engaging with people, or is there like some magic sauce to it?
No magic sauce, not that I'm aware of anyway. I think my team certainly sprinkled some magic sauce because we certainly we moved mountains to say the least. Just getting involved. I door knocked pretty much every day of the campaign. I had some very passionate door knockers with me. Raising money is another one that continues to this day. You can't put out flyers. You have to feed people. There's so many things, but just showing up, and you know we learned as we went and became more coordinated.
Yeah.
But also not knowing once again that I guess when I finally won the nomination, the Calgary-Lougheed Constituency Association, they all resigned as soon as I won. And then there was an email sent out saying that, oh yeah, we didn't get to know you. You should have contacted us. I said I had no idea. Like that was never a thing. I was just, banging on doors every day, meeting people.
Yeah. Well, and I like that you're sharing this too and letting people know. Because one thing I have a very hard time with is when I hear people saying it's us versus them. And I'm always like, who is them? And maybe I'll give a little bit of, there is the Laurentian elite, and, they're off in Ottawa in their bubble of Ottawa. So that's a bit different. And here there is a little bit of that. You see it. But all it took was hard work. There was no big donor, there wasn't any magic sauce. It was hard work, door knocking, getting to know people in the area, and engaging in your community is really what I'm hearing from this.
Correct. Yeah, 100%. No magic sauce, no mystery big donors. Uh, Really weird to think that I am the them now, because
Yeah.
I certainly don't view myself as them, but I am government, which is still, it's still a bizarre thing because I consider myself, I'm still a very large child.
Yeah, well, and this is where, like, I think, or maybe about the Farmers Party in Alberta from I can't remember when, but it was kind of the same thing. They were tired of what was going on in Alberta, and farmers came together and united, and they created a party too, which wasn't, and then it went away. But it's just about getting involved. And what's happened in Canada a little bit, and that's where again it could be us and them and Laurentian elites, but there's become this political class. But that's because I believe we allowed it to happen, because everyday folks like you and I, just some of us aren't even, not just even voting, but not even getting involved in the conversation, asking questions, getting to know your elected official. I have a lot of things I want to say, but just because of where we went with that, you've been in your position now as MLA for how long has it been? It was May.
Just over 7 months, I think. Yeah, May 29th was the election.
So tell me, Eric, do you have people lining up at your door to meet with you and relay their concerns about what the government is doing? Do you get phone calls off the hook all the time?
Not off the hook. I mean, it's quieter this time of year. It's been kind of nice, but certainly the first few months, I it's definitely an adjustment, and I think a lot of it has to do because the legislature, we didn't sit until the end of October, so a lot of it was okay. I'm elected now. What do I do? And
Okay.
figuring out from how to set up an office, how to run your constituency. Then we had to set up like I mentioned, our constituency board, or the Calgary-Lougheed Constituency Association. They resigned when I
Mhm.
won. So we had to set up a new board, president, treasurer, and secretary, I guess. And then there's 27 other seats. So that all of that was new to myself and my team. So putting together the board, and then okay, now what do I do? I was
Yeah.
really fortunate that the office manager, she stayed on and continues to work with me. I'm her fourth MLA, so I work for her. She's the boss. She tells me, what to do, where to go, and I'm so thankful to have her. I certainly wouldn't. I guess I'd still be here, but I wouldn't. I wouldn't have been. She made it much easier for me.
Yeah. Well, great to hear. And maybe let's touch on constituency associations a little bit, because I'm understanding that, well, actually, that's a bit new to me. Even though I worked when I was in university at a constituency office for a local MLA here in Edmonton, I didn't know there was this whole constituency association related to it as well. So that's an interesting point, because a lot of people don't understand too, when you're contacting your MLA, this would be the same with your MP, is that they often will have an office and even an email at one point it was that was tied to the parliament federally or the legislature provincially. And so you have for your constituents, I think that's right, or maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong. And then, but your constituents, actually, I take that back. They're normally supposed to contact you at your constituency office,
Correct.
because it's in that area, it's in that community. So not only can you send an email, that's your constituency office, you usually have a physical location and people can go there and make an appointment with you or call your office. And so can you help explain, because I think I already screwed that up, when you're expected, or constituents, Albertans should be contacting you at your constituency office versus at your legislative office, and how that would look?
Correct. So they could contact me at either office. The best way, by email or by phone. We've always have an open door as well. So if you just want to pop by, feel free. Um, yeah, there are many ways to get a hold of me. And the constituent, and I believe this, and I'm still learning the process as well. The constituency office is non-partisan.
Right.
So
That's
yeah, we represent all the constituents, not just one party or another.
yes.
Where the constituency association, that is partisan, and that is not related to the party. If that makes
Right. Yeah, no, totally. It makes sense to me. So, just to reinforce that point, there's a constituency association. And like you said, there's people like, I think you mentioned the treasurer, president, and there's people, that's a board, and that's to help kind of gives you a bit of a team in the background in your
Correct.
constituency. And there's an opportunity if you want to get involved in politics and or political parties, there's an opportunity to get involved in that level. And then the one thing I found a lot of people kind of don't recognize is that every elected official that you have, whether or not they're the party that's aligned with you, they are your elected official. And that's the only direct person really you should be talking to. You could, of course, contact a leader or the minister. If it's a health issue, you could contact the minister of health. But if you want direct contact with your elected official, even if they're not in the politically aligned, they are your elected representative. And I think that that isn't very clear to many people, because what I've heard is, oh, that person isn't my party, so I've never talked to them.
Correct. Yeah, and we've I still get phone calls and emails from people who are not in our constituency, who
Mm.
have NDP MLAs now, and they're contacting our office because they, for whatever reason.
Well, and I kind of get it, but then I also think it's so great. That's where we have to bridge that gap, is that, if I think we're both pretty regular folks, you and I, but what other people have termed us is some really nasty things. And it's like, if we just sat in front of some people, it's like we're just normal Albertans and Canadians that want the best for everyone in the end. So maybe calling people that have these views, extremists or all these negative things, like if we just sat down in a room, I don't think that they could say it. But then the more you keep that divide open, like my mom has an NDP MP as well, and I wanted my sweet older mom to go to her office and just be like, you're calling me a racist, a Nazi,
Yeah.
like all these derogatory terms. And it's like, look at me. Is that really who you think I am? And I think that way we could start bridging this divide a little bit, I'm hoping.
I certainly hope so. I don't know how many times I've been referred to now as the hard right winger, and I don't. It makes me laugh, but it's come. Let's go have a beer. Let's go talk about things. Like let's have more discussion. We need it more. If there was ever a time in history where you needed to come together and just have conversation, it's now. And I
Yeah.
think by doing what we're doing, just having conversation, and let's sit down with people we don't agree with. Let's have those hard discussions. Let's talk about things, and we're not going to agree all the time, and that's normal. That's great for democracy. That's great for friendships, for all of it. Like that's what discussion is.
Very much agree. And that's where, like, I'm actually saddened that in Canada we've started this shaming and canceling to such an extent that you really, like, people have lost so many friends. And I think it starts from the top. Like, our friend just our friend Justin Trudeau certainly was one of the biggest and most divisive leaders I think we've ever seen in our time. But it's interesting that you just said that you've been called. I think it was a right winger, hard right
Yeah,
winger.
hard right wing. Yeah,
I don't even know the terms because to me they're all so silly. But and I won't share your story. We could get into it another time about how. Like if people knew who you were too. But I used to do a lot of landowner work in Alberta, and big oil and gas and all that stuff. And you know how many times I was called a tree hugger before? It was just, and all of a sudden now I'm this right wing extremist, and I'm
yeah,
like, people, like, if you only knew who I was, I'm like, the one thing I think I am is I try to help people that are in a more vulnerable position, and especially against big oil and gas or big government, where it's a tough fight, and people are vulnerable and they need help.
yeah. Well, I think it's easy to put you in that box. If you're a tree hugger or the hard right winger, they've already defined you as who you're going to be.
Yeah.
I as you were talking about that, I'm making me laugh. I not grew up. I lived in Banff for most of the '90s, and had long hair, and um, would have been called a
Extremist.
Yeah, here I am, the right wing extremist, and I guess I went from tree hugger to extremist as well.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the club. I don't think there's too many of us that go from one.
It's unbelievable. I look back, a couple of years ago when, we'd be walking downtown with 15,000 strong. That all we were doing was, we advocating for. Well, I was advocating for my business, and
Yeah.
no one else was. And there were people constantly giving us the finger, spitting at us, throwing eggs from a high rise downtown Calgary. And, just had you come out and talk to people and very much, had had the mayor come out and spoken to people, that's all people wanted to do, is have the conversation and be heard. And, referencing the prime minister, I think had he come out and just spoken to the people who showed up in Ottawa, I think things would have been a lot different.
Oh, yeah. And instead, he disparaged them. So, like, think about it for a second, Mr. Prime Minister. You have people traveling 5 days to get to Ottawa. That's a little bit of dedication. And I didn't realize, even to the expense on a truck, how much that costs in gas, because Chris Barber said that in evidence. It's like 3 grand
Wow.
to get one way. I think it was. People were determined. They wanted to have a discussion. And like I keep saying, this was citizens wanting to talk to their elected officials, period. Wanting, like, that's something you should welcome. And then it wouldn't have, exactly like you said, got to where it was. But don't disparage these people, communicate with them. Um, there was one story I want to share too, because, and I wasn't going to, but it was when you were saying the spitting on people. Is I I was at the UCP AGM, and I'm trying to be as open-minded with all of this as possible. Like you, politics. I was involved to some extent. Always voted, always tried to get as much information. Worked at an MLA office, but not super involved. I'd never been to an AGM before, and I think that was great. There were 4,000 people there. There was an opportunity to debate policies. And what I wanted to share is that there were a few transgendered women there, and they were speaking against some of the policies in front of almost 4,000 people. And the audience was incredibly respectful. Never was there anything. I went to an NDP town hall. Rachel Notley was hosting and speaking at it, and it was about the APP versus the CPP. And there was a lot of fear mongering, which was unfortunate because by far the vast majority was senior and older. And one younger gentleman spoke up near the end, and he was a fan of Rachel Notley. He made that known right away, and everyone was okay. And then he started questioning, maybe this isn't appropriate to be having this much fear. And people booed him. And my heart actually sank that this is how we're treating other people. When the NDP has been framed as so inclusive, and then booing this guy. UCP has so much been framed as racist and hater of everything. In front of 4,000 people, transgendered women were able to have their say,
Mhm.
and nobody booed them. And I just watched, had those two experiences in pretty close time. And I was like, that's not right. Like, how are we not having this conversation? How are we allowing this to happen in Alberta, in Canada? I just don't get it. What's going on, Eric?
Oh, I wish I had an answer for you. I think it's easy to boo someone and shout them down if you don't agree with them, and then it silences them, and it ends the conversation.
Yeah.
And I think more than ever, we need just to have conversation. We need to have civil discourse. And bringing up the AGM, I attended my first AGM a year ago,
Okay.
and never would I have thought. I think there was, it was hosted in Edmonton, and my wife and I drove up in the early morning snowstorm just to have a say.
Yeah.
and it was incredible. It was powerful. And then that was kind of what got me involved. And then showing up this year, 3,800 strong, and people are saying, that some people were saying that doesn't really represent the party, but 3,800 people showed up. That is part of the party. That's like myself. If I didn't show up to run, well, certainly someone else would, but we got involved. 100 plus volunteers that showed up and continue to show up. And we're not going away. We're only getting stronger. We're getting more involved. And I think there's talk about grassroots, and I think it just getting more regular people involved in the day to day politics. And I certainly uh, can attest, I guess, that if I can do this, anyone can. I don't want to sell myself short, but I still sometimes I sit in a room with the premier and all the ministers, and I still sometimes feel, geez, what the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. But I'm there. I have a seat at the table, and I would encourage anyone else. If I can do this, so can you.
I love that message. And maybe it's still early in your political career, or maybe not. And I am really hoping to have these conversations as we go. But one thing I was kind of surprised at is earlier on, I was kind of surprised that more people didn't stand up, like even elected officials or lawyers or doctors. And then I stood up and became kind of public advocate. And I am not surprised why more people don't stand up anymore. It doesn't almost doesn't matter what side you're on, you're going to get attacked. And how have you found that, and how are you dealing with it? Because one thing, I don't want to leave it on a negative either,
No, no.
but I think that a lot of people, they want to support, but they don't know how. And so, here's one person putting up their hand to take on things, yourself becoming an MLA. But do you see that there's a ton of support behind you as well? Are people running to help you? Wow, that Eric seems like a great gent. I'm going to do what I can to help him. Or is there a disconnect there, do you think, a little bit?
There's certainly still a disconnect because most people don't get involved. Most people still assume that someone else is going to carry the torch for them, and hopefully that's the push for bringing more regular people into the political sphere.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about getting canceled, and you know I think back early on, when the world was shut down, and friends and my wife's friends would ask, "Oh, how's Eric doing?" And she'd say, "Oh, not great, not doing really well." And then I started pushing back a little bit more and started telling my story, and friends started dropping because they didn't want to hear things either. But through all of this, I really found out who my friends are, and the supporters will continue to support. And like I said earlier, we're not going away. We're only getting stronger. Just having more and more regular people coming to the table, and our voices being heard.
Yeah.
We're not going away.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to reinforce too is if you see somebody that's advocating for something you believe in, maybe reach out and see how you could support them, how you can help them, how you could get involved. Because that's one thing I've seen a lot of. Again, it's a lot of talk, but then it's okay, there needs to be some action with it as well. Like, one thing I see all the time is everything in government, it's all corrupt and it needs to come tumbling down, and then we're going to fix it from the bottom up. And I'm like, sure, if that's the way it's going to be, but then let's fast forward 50, 100, 1,000 years. We're not going to be in the same situation, you don't think, if we're not involved and supporting other people? It's just going to come to the same thing in the end, I think.
For sure. And the one thing I've found is that government is slow moving.
Hmm.
It there's lots of meetings and lots of pre-meetings, and hopefully, I feel my role might be to speed things up a little bit. It certainly takes time, but I'm learning as I go, and the process has not always been easy, but it's eye opening for sure.
Yeah. And I love that you said that too. Government is slow. Let's acknowledge that. Law is slow as well. And so I think maybe that's been a bit of the hurdle or the headache that we've had in this last while, is that we've been relying on the government, whoever that may be, or lawyers to change everything overnight at a snap of a finger. But what I'm hoping people understand is they have a lot more power at their fingertips to affect change if they are strategic and coordinated and work together. And the example I've been giving a lot is MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. This was not lawyers, this was not elected officials, and they got strategic, they got involved, they said enough is enough. They worked together and they affected change in the legal system, in the political system. And this is what I just don't see that happening. So I'm hoping we could continue to encourage people to understand how much power they actually have today,
For sure.
tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great example. And there's no reason why we can't, develop a system of getting more people involved. I think, the engagement from that grassroots perspective. And one thing I'm learning too is just, how important the sense of community is, from my group, and then obviously being the MLA in Calgary-Lougheed now, like the groups that exist in the constituency, all of the different associations, and getting involved, having more membership, the level of community engagement, because the more people you bring to the table, the healthier, more robust conversation you're going to have, and better ideas come from it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I am so very glad we had an opportunity to chat, and I really want to continue this and make this a bit more regular so that Albertans, at least, and maybe Canadians as well, will see, how we can affect change. And I'd like to talk a little bit more another time about what's actually going on in the government. It's really hard sometimes, and I'm again hoping to bridge that gap a little bit between citizens and them, the elected
Yes,
officials.
me is
So
them now, I guess. Yeah,
yeah, I know. Just kidding. Of
yeah.
course not. We're all, in this together. We all want good for others. I think there might be a few exceptions. So, but I'm certain there's a lot more of us that are looking for the good in the
I
world.
believe so too, and I think with more of us getting involved, it's only going to make Alberta a better place, make Canada a better place, and just having those difficult conversations, and just the ability to sit down together, talk, discuss, and come to not always resolution, but come agree to disagree sometimes, and that's okay. But let's do it respectfully.
Yeah. Now tell me, anyone watching, how right wing extremist that conclusion was
Yes, yeah, very,
about
very
the
great way.
most, yeah, reconciliatory and collaborative I've heard so far. So thank you so
Yeah,
much,
I'm blowing my
Eric.
cover, I guess. Oops.
They'll never know.
No, okay, don't tell anybody. Thanks so much, Ava. I'm looking forward, yeah, to doing many more of these with you.
Yeah, I look forward to it too, and I really think that it's an opportunity to help, us engage and get citizens more involved and understand their powers. So thank you, and we'll be in touch.
Agreed. Yes, my pleasure. Bye for now.
Bye.